When I go outdoors, I go nowhere without my chainsaw. And in fact, at Christmas time, just to get down to my in-laws in Comox, I had to stop 4 times on the highway and cut a tree that was across during that snowstorm when we went down. And so it's a good thing to have a chainsaw. So anywhere I go, whether I'm going hunting, I'm going out to Side Bay or Raft Cove, I always bring a chainsaw because you never know. And here's the thing. Yeah, the road's clear on the way out, but what if you get somewhere and the wind blows and knocks a tree down? How do you get home? So I'm a believer that you should always have a chainsaw. You should always have it with you if you're going into the outdoors. So we're going to talk a little bit about chainsaws and the use of chainsaws here because there's a lot. Now, I'm by no means an expert. I'm not a faller, but I have taken a chainsaw operator's course by the only person in British Columbia that trains fallers. If you want to be a faller, you have to take his course. So I'd like to think that I've got some good knowledge when it comes to chainsaws. So first of all, can't stress it enough, a chainsaw is the most dangerous power tool you could probably use. A lot of people have been hurt, killed, and maimed with chainsaw. So the absolute positively first thing you need to have is a pair of chainsaw pants or chaps. Now a lot of people will use a chainsaw without one, and I'll be very straight up and forward. They're being stupid because it does not take much for a chainsaw to bite you, and when it does, it makes a horrendous injury. So a pair of faller's pants or chainsaw chaps, they have what's called Kevlar. There's a bunch of Kevlar strands inside underneath this, and those Kevlar strands get caught in the teeth of the saw, get sucked in and block up the clutch and stalls it out rather quickly, but not quick enough in some cases. But if you didn't have a pair of chaps on, then you're going to have a very bad day. So that's the first thing you need to have. Now I have a pair of faller's pants, although I am planning on getting a pair of chaps because you can put them on over top of what you're wearing. Sometimes it's handy. Faller's pants have, there is a label here. Now this thing is completely dissipated. I can't remember if it was, I think it was a red label. There's different labels, different colors, and they correspond to how quickly they're going to stall the saw out. Just buy the highest one you can get, and you'll have no problems with saving yourself. Chainsaws are noisy. So you should have hearing protection and face protection because of all the stuff that flies up. What's handy is one of these also doubles as a great weed whacker helmet because they're noisy, and this thing will stop the weed whacker from flinging poop up in your face. So you need that. Now, some people will say that I'm being a little bit over safe when it comes to a chainsaw, but an axe and some wedges are also very important, and here's why. Most people will say, oh yeah, you only need an axe and wedges if you're knocking a tree down. True, but a lot of the accidents that I've seen from a chainsaw are from people that are cutting a log. They're cutting it improperly, and the log pinches the bar, and they're reefing on it, they're pulling on the saw, and they do pull it out, and then they over rev it, or hit the trigger and almost cut themselves, something like that. So I always have wedges and an axe around because then if I'm cutting my whatever I'm cutting, if it pinches the bar, I can drive a wedge down and unpinch it. Further to that, I have a spare bar and a spare chain. And I can take the power head off, and I can put the spare bar and the spare chain on and cut my other bar and chain out. And that one wasn't something I started doing until I took the chainsaw course, and the guy told us that. So that was very important. Yes?
Can I go to the washroom?
You can. I will point out one thing though. If you are using a chainsaw for work, you have to have a WCB compliant helmet. There are styles that are not WorkSafe compliant, and you have to have a specific minimum size axe. This is a Faller's axe, and you can tell it's a Faller's axe because it has a pin, and that pin holds the head in place. A Faller's axe must have a pin to hold the head in place. It has to be a certain length and a certain weight to drive pins, or drive wedges. So that's what's going on here. That's why I have a specific axe just that goes with my chainsaw. And that's because in the Ranger world, we are equipped to go out and we might have to make a helipad for someone to get a helicopter in and rescue somebody. So, which brings me to the other thing, is if you're using a chainsaw in a work-safe environment, if you're falling a tree, you have to have what's called a wraparound bar, or handle, I should say. This handle goes all the way from here, goes all the way around, and all the way to the other side. That is so that you can hold it properly in both orientations to cut a tree. If you have a chainsaw that just has this half of the bar and this doesn't exist, then it's not a falling saw. And legally, you're not supposed to use it for falling. The other thing about chainsaws is the chain brake. All right? That chain brake is there so that if you're cutting and it flips up, it stops the saw before it comes into your face. Now, basically everything I'm teaching you here is important for anybody that might buy a chainsaw to go cut firewood. All right, you might not be cutting a tree down, but that might be important. The other thing to note is you'll also note the difference between a homeowner saw and a falling saw. I bought a falling saw because, like I said, we make helipads and also want something with a little more pep. A falling saw has these lines. There's this line that goes all the way up here. It goes across the top. It's a black line. And it goes all the way down here. And then it goes across here as well. And that's actually for a faller to line up their cut. When they're cutting, they can see that line and they can use it. It's like a sight on a gun. It's used for aiming and lining up their cuts. So that's the difference between a falling saw and a regular chainsaw. The regular chainsaw is not going to have a wraparound handle. It's not going to have those alignment marks, and it probably won't have these big teeth, these big dogs here. And the bigger that I like these big dogs, you jam them into the log and you can cut. So, safety-wise, like I said, pants, helmet, hearing protection, gloves. You've got this stuff here to get yourself out if you get wedged or if you need to knock a tree down. And that's pretty much what you need to operate a chainsaw. I've got a scabbard here that I use when it's in my truck. On my ATV, I actually built a mount for it, so it slides in and it's on the back of my ATV if I need it. Chainsaws use oil and gasoline mixed, all right, 50-1 in most cases, and chain bar oil. So you have to oil the chain, otherwise it will heat up and it will seize. So bar oil goes in this and gas goes in here. Personally, there's different brands of chainsaws you can buy. You can buy, the two most famous brands are Stihl and Husqvarna, or Husqvarna, depending on how you want to pronounce it. I am a still guy. Basically, growing up, when I was in high school, I worked for the water taxis out in Cole Harbor, and I watched what kind of saws the fallers brought. And fallers generally have two saws. They have their primary saw and their backup saw, because if your primary saw goes down, your work day's over, you don't make any money. No, you grab your other saw, throw your bar and chain on it, and keep cutting. So what I noticed was that the guys who were running Husqvarna were bringing a saw home on a semi-regular basis to make repairs. The guys who had stills, not so much. So that kind of told me that the stills just were kind of the better saw. That's what I bought. That being said, I have friends who have Husqvarnas. They're fine. But so the choice is yours. You know, you got to look up reviews, decide what you want, and buy what you want to buy. And like I said, this is a Fowler saw. Fowler saws start with the 461. Then there's the 480 or the 466, and now they have a 480, and that's the most powerful saws you can get. So the smaller the number, the smaller the saw, and that's correlation to the horsepower and cubic capacity of the engine. So the smaller the saw, the smaller the number. So you can get little tiny ones, you can get little pruning saws, arborist saws, and if you're not going to use a saw very much, I mean, I use my saw quite a bit, but if you're going to use a saw, not so much, I mean, you might be able to get by with some of the homeowner brands out there, Poulan, and some of the knockoff brands. There's actually a company out there that now makes a complete knockoff of these brand name saws, so you can build yourself a 461, just it's not still. All the parts are made in China, except for one piece. I forget which one it is. It's an original piece that you buy from Still, and you can assemble. It's like you buy a kit chainsaw. It's like a puzzle. You put it all together, and yeah, I got a chainsaw. It's almost as good. Yeah, I don't know. I prefer to I just decided I'm going to head down to Macadale's and buy myself a good chainsaw. Maintenance on a chainsaw is pretty straightforward. Sharpen the chain, fuel and oil, and then anything else, and keep the air filter clean, because if the air filter is not clean, then you can't, doesn't work. My air filter is getting there. It looks like it might need a clean here shortly. So, but if an engine can't get enough air, then it won't run. So if your air filter plugs up, it won't run. I'm not going to start it because that would be really noisy. Also, because this chainsaw is the third largest one you can get. It's got a decompression button on here. You want to push that down so you can actually pull it. To sharpen a chainsaw, that's where a lot of people really struggle and have a difficulty sharpening, because it's easy to run into problems. And once again, a dull chain makes you push harder, and you can have accidents. So to sharpen a chainsaw, all you really need is this, if you're skilled. But adding this guy makes things a little bit easier, and I'll show you the difference. So, first of all, one thing we need to know about a chainsaw is there's a tooth and there's a raker. And the raker is up front, and the tooth which is what does the cutting. The tooth has to have the proper geometry, and there's a little line scratched on top of each tooth that shows you the angle the tooth should be at. And once you reach that line, it's time to throw the chain out and get a new Now, one thing I learned about in my chainsaw course is, and the guy, because I used my saw at the course as a demo, the guy gave me a chain for this. They actually, for a while, they used to make it, they tried, or I should say, the companies tried to market an anti-kickback chain. So what that means is that if you take this and you jam it into a log, it's going to kick back at you. And most accidents happen from kickback on a chainsaw. So a company developed an anti-kickback chain. And I put it on this saw, and I could not make it kick back. I was like, wow, why is this not a thing? And I kid you not, the instructor said it's pretty simple. All the fallers on the coast didn't want it because they thought it made them, weak and pansies and stuff. So they did it, so it just never took off. Yeah, I know. That's what he said. He said they couldn't get anybody to buy it because nobody wanted, because it's a gimmick, or I'm a real man, I don't need a chain. Anti-kickback design. Anyway, it didn't take off. So this guy bought a roll of it before it, and put it on all his saws for teaching the course, for safety, and he gave me one for my saw, and it's my spare chain. And then once this thing dies, this chain is done, I'll put it on here and use it until that's done. So the thing about chains is that they have to be sharp, but there's one thing that a lot of people don't know about, and that's the rakers. The rakers have to be a certain height, okay? So what do I mean by that? So on a chain, you have, and I'm just going to do, you have the tooth is like this, all right, and this is what does the cutting right here. And then you have the raker, and the raker comes up, and what the raker does is it limits the amount of tooth. That's a terrible drawing. So what a raker does is it limits the amount of tooth so that's all that's doing the cutting right now, that little bit. So when you file your chainsaw down, eventually, as it gets smaller and smaller, that raker will be above the tooth and it won't do any cutting. And a lot of people don't realize that. Then when they do realize that, well, how do I fix that? Well, you file the raker down. That's what my flat file is for. So what they'll do is they'll file it down, and they might file it down too much. And now they got 3 times the amount of tooth up. And that thing is really going to dig in, and it's going to throw the saw back at you. So that's what this guy is for. This guy sets our raker, and it also is a guide for sharpening. So this is how it works. On this guide, it's got a hard and a soft side, so it depends what kind of wood you're cutting. Are you cutting hardwood or are you cutting softwood? I mean, if I was going into a forest that was predominantly red cedar, and I was a faller, I'd use the soft side. Hemlock is pretty soft, so I'm going to set it to the softwood. So what we do is we place this down on top of the tooth. Okay. And then the raker comes up, so it sits on the tooth. Yeah, it's been a while since I've used this actually. So this goes onto the chain, it lays down on top of the tooth, and then what I'm going to do is I just take my file and I just file across. And I can only file so many times until it's very clumsy. That's the only thing I don't like about it. So I'm just going to file across it until I feel it sliding along the top here. And that sets my raker height. I do that to each one. So until it slides. You just go along. I'm not going to sharpen the whole saw in front of you. That would take forever. So first thing you do is you set your raker height. So now that's perfectly set to the tooth. Some would say you do the raker second, or because you're going to sharpen the tooth and you're going to take the tooth down a little bit. I've done it both ways and I've found it doesn't really make a difference. But without the guide, you can file it down way too much and you go to cut and then it just it takes off on you. So the next step is sharpening your tooth. So what's good about this guide is that it fits onto your saw just like this, and it fits between the links. And then you can, so if you're not skilled at sharpening by a chain, then you can use the guide, and it's got these two rubber silicone rollers, and it guides your angle and your depth and everything. And what you want to do is you want to count how many strokes on each tooth. You want them all to be the same. So that was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you're also looking at the front of the tooth. I mean, if you rock your saw and you cut into some dirt and you chip it and you ding up the teeth, you're going to have to file it a bit more. So I'll do 10 strokes on a dull chain that may have been damaged, 5 if I'm just touching it up or whatever the case may be. And then I'll look at all the teeth. If one tooth is a little more damaged, I'll count how many strokes it takes to fix that tooth, and I'll go back and do all the other ones the same. So it takes about 5 or 10 minutes to sharpen up a chainsaw by hand. When you're done, just push it forward, pop this onto the next tooth. Same thing. And so on. Once you've got it nice and sharp, you're good to go. Keep in mind that your chainsaw file has to match the size of tooth. So when you buy a saw and you buy a chain, ask them for whatever size file that you need for that tooth. They'll give you the right one. You can't just use any old chainsaw file. It has to be the right size for that one. I can't get the handle of this thing, but is it? I got this thing jammed right down in there. Oh, I have to throw this thing away. It's a Husqvarna handle. Oh, God, yeah, I can't. So anyway, sharpen it, keep it sharp. You also need to oil the bar tip. There's an oiler on some of them. It doesn't look like mine is even oilable. Sometimes there's a grease hole and you stick a thing in there and grease it. Also, chainsaw bars wear out after a while. The chain wears the bottom more than the top. So after a while, you'll see that people who use chainsaws a lot, the logo may be upside down on the bar. I once was at a bus stop during college. There were some people that were cut some trees down and cleaning up after a windstorm, and a couple people were like, "Oh, look at that guy! He doesn't know what he's doing. He's got his bar on upside down." And I was just like, well, he's got his bar on upside down because he wore this edge off, then he flipped it over to wear this one down before throwing it out. That's like, why these things cost like $80. So you're going to wear both sides down and then throw it out, or you're just going to wear half of it down and throw it out? What's the smart call? You wear both sides down. It's a label. It means nothing. And you know when to replace your bar, or when you need to flip it or replace it. It's because your cuts will start wandering every single time. You won't be able to cut a straight round or make a straight cut. Anything else I can tell you about a chainsaw? I mean, the only other thing I can say is that when you pull down the bottom of the chain, it should snap up. It shouldn't be loose. And that's that's a bit on the loose side. So you need your scrunch. It's a screwdriver and a wrench. So they call it a scrunch. And what you do is you loosen the two nuts on the side. Don't put your knuckles into the teeth here, which is why I'm prying up with it so I'm controlled. So we want these to be loose. And then right here, where is it? Where are you? There's a screw covered in schmoo. There's it on this side. Oh, wow. It's been so long since I've actually changed sharpened this up. So there's a screw sometimes here. On mine, there's here. My dad has like 6 different still saws and 3 different Husqvarna saws because he lives on a what do you call it, a hobby farm homestead place. And I'm always fixing his saws for him. And so they're all, one of his saws, there's actually just a thing you grab and you turn, it goes click, 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 and that tightens the chain up. Everybody's got a different chain tightener. On the homeowner saws, it's almost always up here. Well, now that I'm actually remembering, it's on here. The guy said on the course that all the newer saws are over here. So all I'm going to do is just tighten this. I'll back it off just so you can see. Now you can see that's just hanging there. And then we're going to tighten it up. Just turn the handle, and you can see the chain starting to get tight. And then it's kind of, there's no real hard, fast rule about how tight to get these, aside from some people say you should never be able to pull down and see the bottom of the chain. The other thing I can't do here, because I don't have anything that I can really sacrifice, I guess I can use the edge of the desk. When you're doing this, you want to have the tip of the saw up on something and push down on the saw, because when you're cutting, the bar, when it's loose, see that bar wiggles back and forth. And you want to have it in the push down position when you're doing this and when you tighten it up, because otherwise it'll loosen up when you're cutting, because you're pushing down when you're cutting. So you want to push down when you're tightening these up. So don't lose your scratch, you need it. Don't lose your file, you need it. There are a number of people that have drilled holes and put like a little clip and stuff, but I don't know. Figure out how you want to carry your stuff. So, like I said, I'm not a faller, but I've spent my life around chainsaws. Pretty good idea how they are. Get to know your chainsaw when you get it. Case in point, I know all my dad's saws far better than I know my own saw, because I don't use my own saw as much as he uses his. He uses his every day. Also on the bottom, on some saws, this one included, there's an adjustment for how much oil that the oiler pumps out onto the chain while you're running it. I recommend you just set it to all the way. It'll run and last longer. And you also want to check and make sure your oiler is working. Best way to do that is when you get it running, just hold it up against a log or a piece of cardboard or something and just rev it up. Just hold it there and move it back and forth. If it's oiling, oil will sling off the end of the tip and you'll see it splatter onto what you're cutting. And then, if you are like my old man who has lots of chainsaws and is always sharpening them, go ahead and buy yourself a chainsaw sharpener. So he's got one on his bench that he can sharpen a chainsaw blade rather, or a chainsaw chain, not a blade. I was thinking he's got a sawmill, and he's got a sawmill sharpener blade, sawmill blade sharpener too. But basically, he puts the chain, takes the chain right off, puts it in a thing, slide, slide, and it sharpens it. They're handy too. Questions on chainsaws? Get yourself one, carry it, going off road. And get a still. They'll never let you down. Not one of those Husqvarnas. Although I should say I grew up running two Husqvarnas 2800s when I was a kid and never had a problem.